Brushali, you can start the webinar.
Yeah, sure.
Recording in progress.
Very warm welcome to everyone. I think we'll start because we're already 5 minutes over time and we have over 300 plus participants now. A very warm welcome to everybody who's attending this launch call from Aditya Birla Asset Management Company. We are very, very happy to have you here and welcome you to listen to the launch call for our Quant NFO. As our co-CIO equities, who I will hand over to now, will tell you, this is a uniquely positioned fund. It is very different from what is currently there under Quant in the market and the brand name of Quant in the market, and also that it is going to be fulfilling a lot of the space in the large and the mid cap segment. So again, thank you very much for being here. Let me just quickly introduce Mr. Harish Krishnan to you. Mr. Harish Krishnan has an experience of nearly 20 years in the asset management industry, both domestic and international. Prior to joining Aditya Birla Sun Life as the co-CIO and head of equities, he was associated with Kotak Mutual Fund for more than 10 years as the senior fund manager for equity. He has also worked with Kotak Mahindra UK Limited, where he managed offshore funds based out of Singapore and Dubai. He is an engineer from Trichur Government College and has done his PGDBM from IIM Kozhikode and is also a chartered financial analyst from the CFA Institute, USA. Before I hand over to him, a quick introduction for myself. My name is Kamaini. I head the retail sales for Aditya Birla AMC. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. And without further ado, let me hand over to Harish to take you through the details of our Quant NFO. Over to you, Harish.
Thank you so much, Kamaini, and good evening, partners. It's really an honor and privilege for us to go through this launch presentation of the Aditya Birla Sun Life Quant NFO. Friends, Kamaini, just check whether you can see the screen, just so that we're clear on
We can
that.
see the screen, we can hear you. Clear. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, friends, we all know about the role of man and the role of machine, and how over time machines have come to the benefit of man in terms of various decision making. Now, this collaboration of man and machine, possibly one of the highest or the best collaboration that you can see, is in the aviation industry. It came as a surprise when we were actually researching for this, that in a typical flight, the pilot is actually in control of the flight for about 3 minutes or so. So in a typical flight that lasts about 72 minutes, an average flight, just about 3 minutes is what the pilot is in control of. The rest of the time is all given to the machine, which does it on an autopilot mode. And this, over the course of the last, almost say 15, 20, 25 years, has meant far greater safety, far lesser crashes, far lesser wear and tear of parts. More importantly, a much more experience for the flyer. And therefore, it's a win-win for the manufacturer, for the aircraft, for the pilot, as well as for the end user. Now, this is what when we think of man-machine collaboration can be in various facets of our life. But when it comes to investor, is there a way in which we can take the benefit of human insight? Can we take the benefit of machine and try and create a similar such product? Okay, that has been our endeavor at Aditya Birla Sun Life Quant Fund, wherein we are seeking to blend man plus machine, which is greater than man or machine. Now, when it comes to investment, if you look at on the right hand side, which is typically the domain of the human fund manager. By and large, when we look at mutual fund portfolios and the outstanding talent that is there in the Indian mutual fund industry, and over the course of so many events and so many cycles over the course of the last 20, 30 years, one thing really stands out in terms of the human fund management capability, which is that human beings typically don't want to be associated with bad companies. So whenever you see a crash, whenever you see a number of companies, which go down by 70-80% kind of a experience that they may have seen, and don't recover from that fall. That is, you can always see a transient blip like what happened during COVID, but by and large, these are permanent wealth erosion, kind of candidates. You generally see that in mutual fund portfolios, you will see very, very little evidence of such companies. So we are generally very good in terms of avoiding bad companies. However,
So I'm very sorry to interrupt your flow, but there is a request for people for a little more Hindi, please.
Okay, sure. Okay, sounds good. तो ये हो गया ह्यूमन फंड मैनेजर की कैपेबिलिटी, प्राइमरली कि हम बुरे कंपनीज को सेलेक्ट नहीं करते हैं. ओके, बट व्हेन इट कम्स टू द नेगेटिव ऑफ ह्यूमन फंड मैनेजर्स, वन ऑफ द की नेगेटिव्स ऑफ ह्यूमन फंड मैनेजर कि हम इमोशनल हो जाते हैं when it comes to decision making. How much ever we try, there is a certain amount of emotion that comes in when we are trying to make decision making. और ये सबसे ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट करता है टिपिकली जब सेलिंग करते हैं. बाइंग के टाइम पे बहुत सारे हम डेटा देखते हैं, बहुत सारे वैल्यूएशन पैरामीटर्स देखते हैं एक्सेट्रा टू आइडेंटिफाई व्हेन इट कम्स टू बाइंग. लेकिन सेलिंग के टाइम पे जनरली दो इमोशंस होते हैं. एक है अ रिग्रेट ऑफ सेलिंग टू अर्ली और अ रिग्रेट ऑफ सेलिंग टू लेट. इस चक्कर में हमारा जो डिसीजन मेकिंग है बहुत काफी हद तक सब ऑप्टिमल होता है. सो दिस इज ब्रॉडली व्हाट कम्स फ्रॉम द ह्यूमन फंड मैनेजर एलिमेंट, विच इज कि बहुत अच्छा परख है in terms of avoiding bad companies. On the other hand, the downside is key emotions, especially when it comes to biases, especially when it comes to selling, impacts overall consistency and repeatability of fund performance. On the other hand, अगर हम machine की बात करें तो machines are generally very good at very high number crunching. बहुत volume देख पाएंगे तो बहुत fast it comes out with an analysis. More importantly, machines में emotions की there is no scope. Very clear and buying discipline and very clear selling discipline, more importantly, can actually provide come from the machine. However, machine की negative क्या है कि it is garbage in, garbage out, which is basically अगर machines will not be able to differentiate which is a good company, which is a manipulated company, etc., because it just looks at certain parameters which a human mind will be far better at trying to discern and to say कि ये most likely एक अच्छी कंपनी है और ये most likely एक manipulated company है. So therefore there are certain positives of the human mind, there are certain positives of the machine, and more importantly the negatives of each other can be cancelled out if they are blended together in a way that can help elevate the overall investor experience. Now I will turn you into another important facet of how machines are actually crunching data. तो टिपिकली अगर हम देखेंगे लेफ्ट हैंड साइड पे, जब भी हम कोई भी पोर्टफोलियो के बारे में बात करते हैं, यू इनवेरिएबली गेट टू सी इट इन द कंस्ट्रक्ट ऑफ सेक्टर्स कि बैंकिंग कितना है, आईटी कितना है, कैपिटल गुड्स कितना है, हेल्थ केयर कितना है, इज द टिपिकल फंडामेंटल कंस्ट्रक्ट जो काफी टाइम से ट्रेडिशनल वे से हम देखते हैं. एंड इसका प्राइमरी रोल या प्राइमरी रीजन क्यों हम देखते हैं, बिकॉज वी थिंक एंड वी आर गिवन टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट companies in a particular sector tend to perform together, right? तो बैंकिंग स्टॉक्स है तो बैंकिंग स्टॉक्स एक टिपिकल फैशन में परफॉर्म करते हैं. दैट इज द इनसाइट दैट वी हैव. इसीलिए हमने सेक्टर्स में ये हिस्सा किया है, right? Now in the 90s there were two researchers in US, primarily Ken French and Eugene Fama. उन दोनों को सब्सिक्वेंटली नोबेल प्राइज भी मिला था इस काम के लिए, जिन्होंने काम किया था कि not only through sectors but there are other ways, other dimensions through which we can try and classify stocks. एक dimension आया था उनका value as a factor. Basically basis on some parameters, companies which are cheaper than the market tend to perform differently from the market. So the important point is differently from the market. सिर्फ market जैसा नहीं performance होता है, market के थोड़ा different performance आता है if they are basically belonging to the value factor. It's important that we stress कि ये different है. It doesn't mean that it will outperform or underperform, but it'll give you a different performance from that of the market. Similarly, they came across this factor called the size factor, which is companies which are small tend to perform differently from the market. कुछ टाइम के बाद उन्होंने लो वॉलेटिलिटी एक फैक्टर भी डिस्कवर किया, which is basically companies which have a lower volatility in the past tend to perform differently. Subsequently, another factor called the quality factor came through, and in the late 90s there was an Indian researcher, actually Jagdish, along with Titman, an American researcher, that actually published a path-breaking report called the momentum factor. Momentum factor क्या होता है कि whatever has been the past winners tend to perform over the course of the next 1, 2, 3, 4 months different from the market. Similarly, what are the past losers tend to perform as losers over the course of the next 1, 2, 3, 4 months is their finding. Okay, so ये एक important way है in which we look at the same portfolio construct, but unlike a sectoral construct, we are looking at from a dimension of factors कि momentum factor हो सकता है, value factor हो सकता है, size factor हो सकता है, quality factor हो सकता है, etc., etc. And एक stock can be both value, momentum and quality at the same time as well. So therefore it's a completely different dimension in which one is trying to harness this signal of what we call factor investing. So अभी तक जितना भी मैंने बात किया है, basically I have said that will it be not wonderful if we can get the benefit of man and machine? दोनों man और machine के अलग अलग strengths हैं, and they have complementary strengths, ताकि एक का weakness दूसरे का strength है, etc. Second, I have introduced you to this concept that unlike the traditional way जहां पे हम sectors के तरफ से देख रहे हैं, we can try and view a similar portfolio from the lens of factors. अभी हम देखते हैं कि आदित्य बिरला सन लाइफ क्वांट फंड कैसे एक्चुअली यूज करता है ये दोनों इनसाइट, बोथ मैन एंड मशीन, थ्रू फैक्टर इन्वेस्टिंग टू कम थ्रू द फाइनल प्रोडक्ट. ओके, ब्रॉडली हम 4 सिग्नल्स यूज करते हैं. पहला सिग्नल है जो हमारे इंडस्ट्री के म्यूचुअल फंड मैनेजर्स है, उसके पोर्टफोलियो से हम एक सिग्नल ढूंढ रहे हैं. दूसरा है wisdom of the crowd, which is basically the momentum factor primarily, along with few other factors which I'll explain, is what we are looking at from this signal. तीसरा है सेल साइड. सेल साइड मतलब ब्रोकर कम्युनिटी, जो एक्चुअल रिपोर्ट लिखते हैं कंपनीज के बारे में, उसका एस्टिमेट्स करते हैं, वहां से वी टेक अ सिग्नल विच इज बेसिस फ्यूचर ग्रोथ एक्सपेक्टेशंस ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर कंपनी, फ्यूचर का सिग्नल है. और चौथा जो है वो है फोकस ऑन द पास्ट बिहेवियर ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर स्टॉक, कि कैसा वॉलेटाइल रहा, कैसा क्वालिटी रहा, विच इज ऑन द पास्ट बेसिस. तो ये चारों सिग्नल अगर आप देखोगे तो ईच ऑफ दीज 4 सिग्नल्स आर वेरी डिफरेंट. Okay, they come from the mutual fund fact sheets, they come from various factors, they come from sell side industry, and they come from the past experience of that stock that an average investor would have experienced. ये चारों का एक interplay से हम actual signal ढूंढते हैं. Now I will uncover what exactly, how we construct the portfolio at any given point of time using each of these 4 signals. Okay. To start with, I want to make a point कि कोई भी फंड हाउस में, अगर आप मान लीजिए कि बिरला के फंड हाउस में बहुत सारे स्कीम्स है, बहुत सारे फंड मैनेजर्स है, बहुत डिफरेंट स्टाइल्स भी है. Some will be value focused, some will be growth focused, some will be quality focused, etc. Right? And कोई भी फंड हाउस में 200, 300, 400 स्टॉक्स होंगे as a totality within the fund house, जहां पे different fund managers would have different kind of stocks in different schemes. But जैसे कि आपके इंडस्ट्री या कोई भी इंडस्ट्री में एक परेटो प्रिंसिपल या पावर लॉ बोलते हैं, 80-20 रूल, जहां पे जैसे कि सेल्स में टिपिकली बोलते हैं कि 20% ऑफ क्लाइंट्स अकाउंट फॉर 80% ऑफ रेवेन्यूज. इन अ सिमिलर वे, in any AMC in India, the top 75 positions account for 80% of AUM. Okay, so while, for example, in Birla we have 368 companies today, where we have invested in across various schemes, the top 75 positions account for 78% of AUM. Similarly, I can talk about other fund houses and get to roughly around 78, 79, 80, 81%. So broadly, the top 75 names account for roughly 80% of a particular AMC. Now, why is this important? कि भले we may, as a fund house, we may have 300, 400 stocks. For it to come into the core, which is the top 75 names, it has to be seen from कि not only one fund manager, but multiple fund managers have to think that it merits weight in their particular funds. Multiple analysts must have seen it. The CIO, head of equities must have seen it. The CEO, the investment committee would have seen it. The risk management committee would have seen it. So to get from the fringe of, say, the 200 or the 300 stock to the top 75, बहुत ज्यादा फोकस होता है, and this is the core of the fund house. This is the fund, this is the position that is there across multiple portfolios, and this is the core of the fund house, which kind of makes or breaks the performance of the fund house at any point of time. Therefore, in terms of the ability of the fund house to have greater due diligence, to have greater comfort with the risk management, to have greater comfort on corporate governance, काफी हद तक बहुत ज्यादा है compared to every other position. Obviously, in every other position also there is a lot of due diligence, but to get into this score 75 in any fund house, that's a lot more due diligence that typically various fund houses do it. Okay, so we start with the top 75 of each of the fund houses. At least 15 fund houses dekhte hain. And as more and more fund houses come and more styles come through, we'll keep adding and collating this data. So आज के दिन में अगर हम देखेंगे तो बिरला का टॉप 75, कोटक का टॉप 75, आईसीआईसीआई टॉप 75, एक्सिस टॉप 75, एचडीएफसी टॉप 75, करते करते if you I look at all the top 75 positions in various fund houses, I get to about 238 companies. Okay, so the most important point that we are saying is these set of 238 companies are possibly the most well researched within the buy side, within the mutual fund outfits, jahan pe there is a lot of focus on risk. Okay, so the chance of a very poor managed company, jahan pe you can see very large hit is very limited. Okay, from these 238 240 companies which is there today, we remove all the small caps. हमारा focus है सिर्फ large और mid caps का. So we want to look at only large and mid caps within this set of the top 75 of each of them. So we get to maybe from 240 such companies, we will remove say 15, 20, 25 companies at any point of time to arrive at only large and mid cap companies within the portion of the top 75. Okay, then we bring in the quality factor. Now टिपिकली जब हम कोई भी कंपनी देखते हैं तो हम देखते हैं कि लास्ट 5 साल का रिटर्न कैसा गया है. मान लीजिए कि लास्ट 5 साल में there was a phase जहां पे कोई भी स्टॉक 75-80% फॉल हुआ है, वेल्थ डिस्ट्रॉय हुआ है 75-80%, और वो वापस टॉप में आ रहा है. क्वाइट लाइकली आवर थिंकिंग है कि ये एक मैनिपुलेटेड स्टॉक है, बिकॉज इतना जल्दी मार्केट का मेमोरी फ्रेश नहीं हुआ होगा कि इतना बड़ा नुकसान होने के बाद भी they participate in that fund, right? In that stock. Similarly, let's say that a stock has gone up at least 10x over the course of the last 5 years. तो हमारा immediate thinking है कि are we too late into this party? कि ये miss हो गया है and do we need to get on board this bus at this point of time? Rather, let us avoid this. The same way we look at these quality parameters, दोनों extreme के परफॉर्मेंस हम एलिमिनेट करते हैं, थोड़े बहुत क्वालिटी फैक्टर्स देखते हैं और 10, 15, 20 कंपनी निकाल देते हैं. सो लाइक आई सेड, फर्स्ट वी टेक द टॉप 75 इन ईच फंड हाउस. उसमें से करीबन आज के दिन में 240 कंपनी है, वहां से हम स्मॉल कैप हटा देते हैं, 215, 220 कंपनी रह जाते हैं. उसके बाद हम ये एक्सट्रीम ड्रॉ डाउन और एक्सट्रीम गेन्स दोनों को हटा देते हैं. We get to around 200 odd companies, right? Now, from there, we look at the momentum factor. Now, for the momentum factor, we look at the last 6-month return. Now, typical momentum factor 6 महीने का रिटर्न देखता है, which is basically momentum factor का दूसरा नाम है wisdom of the crowd, because इसमें हर तरह के पार्टिसिपेंट्स आ जाते हैं. म्यूचुअल फंड आ जाता है, प्रमोटर आ जाता है, आपका रिटेल आ जाता है, एचएनआई आ जाता है, प्रॉप फंड्स आ जाते हैं, एफआईआई आ जाता है, इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज आ जाते हैं. सो देयरफॉर द कलेक्टिव व्यू ऑफ ऑल ऑफ दीज tends to move the prices at the margin, and therefore what has happened in the last 6 months is essentially a view of each of these parties put together in terms of what is coming into the trend. So wo ho gaya ek wisdom of the crowd. Now a typical momentum factor looks at the last 6 month kind of returns. इसमें हमारा दो ट्विस्ट है. एक है कि एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम वी डोंट लुक एट द लास्ट 1 month रिटर्न. ओके, तो अगर आज कर रहा हूं मैं, मान लीजिए 5 जून, तो मैं लास्ट 1 महीने का सिग्नल नहीं देखता हूं, और उससे पहले के 6 महीने मैं पीछे चला जाता हूं टू गेट द स्टार्टिंग डेट एंड द एंडिंग डेट. सो दैट इज द फर्स्ट पॉइंट, एंड आई विल एक्सप्लेन टू यू हाउ दिस हेल्प्स अस एट अ लेटर पॉइंट बाय अवॉइडिंग द लास्ट 1 month सिग्नल. ओके, सेकेंडली, what we are more interested is just not point to point return की starting date और ending date में अगर हम returns देखेंगे and we sort से 200 कंपनी को हम sort करेंगे from descending order of returns, we are not interested just in point to point returns. What we are interested is in consistent returns. तो मान लीजिए, let me give you an example. 3 तरह के स्टॉक्स है. एक स्टॉक है जो 5.5 महीने कुछ नहीं किया है, लास्ट के 1 हफ्ते में 50% रिटर्न दिया, ये हो गया एक स्टॉक. दूसरा स्टॉक है which goes up 50%, comes down -30%, goes up 50%, comes down -30%, and on the end date is at 50%. right? The third is a stock which goes up slowly, comes down, goes up slowly, comes down, and then at the end of the thing, it is at 50%. Our preference is for the third lot. Okay, we are not looking at just point-to-point returns. We are looking at the consistency in returns over just point-to-point returns. So from about 200 companies, we look at about 40 to 50 companies that come from this thing. So we are talking about the top 20 or 25% of the signal that we are trying to harvest at this point of time, right? अभी तक का जो भी मैंने बताया कि म्यूचुअल फंड के फैक्ट शीट हो या क्वालिटी फैक्टर हो या मोमेंटम फैक्टर हो, विजडम ऑफ क्राउड्स हो, ये सब पास्ट डेटा के बेसिस पे है. इस पे हम अभी फ्यूचर के ग्रोथ एक्सपेक्टेशंस से हम सिग्नल को ड्रॉ करेंगे. बेसिकली हमारा थॉट प्रोसेस ये है कि just because a stock has gone up, we don't want to buy into a stock where जहां पे sell side या broker community का positive view नहीं है. Okay, so we are looking at what is called revisions. Revisions मतलब 6 महीने पहले और आज के दिन में एक्सपेक्टेशंस कैसे चेंज हुआ है इन टर्म्स ऑफ द फ्यूचर, कि इज इट इंप्रूविंग और इज इट डिक्लाइनिंग. सो 200 कंपनी है, 200 कंपनी का ये एक सिग्नल देखते हैं, सेल्स, प्रॉफिट, प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी, बाय सेल चेंज एक्सेट्रा, 4-5 चीजें देखते हैं फ्रॉम द सेल साइड, राइट? और उनको रैंक करते हैं 1 to 200. We don't want basically the bottom 2 quintiles, which is basically quintile मतलब पहले 40 कंपनी Q1, उसके 40 कंपनी Q2, लगा 40 के हिसाब से, if I have 200 companies, right? So I don't want to be part of the Q4 and Q5. Basically we don't want just hope trades जहां पे स्टॉक ऊपर जा रहा है but there is no fundamental improvement that sell side can see. Okay, and therefore we want more consistent names that are improving, that are come through the quality parameters from the mutual fund houses themselves, wherein we have avoided those extreme manipulated names as well as names which have gone up significantly, so that we get a reasonably quality kind of a portfolio. So totally from an initial thing of about 240 जो म्यूचुअल फंड के फैक्ट शीट से मिला है, we finally come to about 40 to 50 stocks. Okay, अभी नाम मिल गए, उसका वेट कैसे करेंगे? To weight it, basically we start with the equal weight first. Okay, which is basically अगर 40 स्टॉक है तो हम 2.5% सबको देते हैं. उसके बाद हम स्क्यू करते हैं बेसिस वॉलेटिलिटी. लोअर द वॉलेटिलिटी, हायर द वेट, and higher the volatility, lower the weight. The maximum weight is capped at 5%. The minimum weight is capped at 0.5%. So इस तरह से, we are trying to draw from the experience of the fund manager. We are drawing from the experience of how the past has been. Okay, it hasn't been more volatile, less volatile, what has been the drawdown patterns, etc. We are trying to draw from the wisdom of the crowds. We are trying to draw from the sell side revisions to arrive at a portfolio जहां पे typically you see a lot better quality names. तो जब भी crash होता है, typically in the journey of an investor, there will be multiple times of crash, right? Now the first set of names that any fund manager would want to buy would be the names which are part of his core of the holdings. There will be names which are part of very high quality. There will be names which is in momentum. There will be names in which there is sell side earnings revision upwards. Okay, so the same insight as to how we look at stocks, we have just put it in a process जहां पे clear rules है, so that we get it on the basis of that, and then we weigh them on the basis of low volatility. Okay, so this is broadly how a portfolio at any given point of time, when we run the signal, gets created. Now comes to the interesting point कि जैसे कि हम टिपिकली जब फ्लाइट लेते हैं तो पायलट कॉकपिट में एंटर करता है, he or she basically types in the route map. Similarly, as the fund manager, we give the universe, we provide the entire system, the entire code, etc., and we pass it on to the machine. फिर पायलट ऑटो पायलट में चला जाता है, we hand it over to the machine gives us our 40 names, let's say, of the weights also. Now, just like in a aeroplane journey, in a flight path, बीच में turbulence आता है, right? And that is when the pilot takes control for some time and then hands it back to the autopilot. Similarly, let's say out of the 40 names, one name sees an adverse development. Maybe the promoter is sent to jail. Okay, then as an active fund manager, we remove that particular name reinvest it into Nifty. Baki 39 names continue to remain the same, and it goes back into the auto mode. Okay. Now the flight is reaching the destination and it wants to land. Okay. What does the pilot do? He or she checks with the air traffic controller कि मैं कब land करूं. Okay, and sometimes the air traffic controller says that okay, बस थोड़ा और चक्कर काटना है, and therefore it keeps circling before it finally lands. Now, similarly is how we look at the next rebalance. जैसे कि मैंने बताया कि हर सिग्नल का एक फेड रेट होता है. We can't keep using the same signal forever, right? So now how do we determine when we have to again rebalance? Okay, so typically we rebalance every 3 months. Okay, so after every 3 months we run a rebalance. Okay, but sometimes क्या होता है कि the end date or sometime in between the 3 months could be a period like today or like the last few days जहां पे बहुत उथल पुथल हो, बहुत volatility हो. Okay, now typically if I were to draw the signal in extremely volatile conditions, I am not going to get the signal, but I am going to get the market factor or the noise more than the signal. Okay, so what I do is basically I wait for some period till the market stabilizes. Okay, and then again run the rebalance. So the maximum period to rebalance will be 6 months. On general, we rebalance every 3 months by and large. So this is as far as the next rebalance. So एक टाइम पे ये मेन फर्स्ट पोर्टफोलियो आ गया, फिर रीबैलेंस के टाइम पे एक और सिग्नल आ गया, एक और सेट ऑफ स्टॉक्स आ गए. इन दोनों को हम कैसे अभी ब्लेंड करेंगे नए सिग्नल में is the third aspect. Okay, now in the new signal, whatever is part of the topmost stocks of the signal, which is the Q1 signal, will always be part of the new portfolio. 8-10 नाम तो हमेशा change होंगे if it is part of the new signal, right? We still have, let's say, another 40-50 names of the original portfolio. उसमें से we will see that as long as you are part of the top 3 signals, okay, in terms of quintile, we want to continue holding it. ये हम क्यों कर रहे हैं? See, typically we all know that, markets or businesses don't work on a fixed frequency. कि उसको नहीं पता है कि हर quarterly उसको perform करना है, कि ये करना है, etc. Right? Different companies take different times to perform. But the thinking is that if there are, say, 200 companies in our universe, as long as the performance of this company is at least close to the 100th company, which is the median company, we think that this company is not hurting us. Okay, but the moment it goes below the 120th company, which is in 200 companies, Q1 is the top 40, Q2 is the next 40, Q3 is 81 to 120, and Q4 is 121 to 180, 160 and below that, right? The moment it goes below to the 121st name and below, that is when we say that because now it is time that you are beginning to hurt, it is time for you to get out of the portfolio. At a later date, that same company can be at the top of the signal at a future rebalance date, and it can get back into the portfolio. Now, what this does is that 2 things it helps us. एक है कि टिपिकली अगर आप मोमेंटम फैक्टर देखते हो और उसका चर्न देखते हो, तो चर्न ऑलमोस्ट 70-80% होता है, बहुत हाई चर्न होता है, बिकॉज दे आर ऑलवेज वांटिंग द हाईएस्ट सिग्नल एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. ओके, through this process, by giving good companies more time, actually we reduce the churn to almost 25-28%. So almost 1/3 we are able to reduce the churn. More importantly, for good companies, time is a benefit rather than a deterrent. So what we have seen is by giving them more time, actually the returns tend to be better than what you would otherwise imagine. We are always looking at the topmost signal. So this is broadly the process of how we create the signal from each of these 4 sources. We blend man and machine. We have a clear buying discipline, a clear selling discipline, with a lower churn, with a dynamic rebalance to try and get the benefit of man and machine. There is some scope for intervention of the active fund manager in case there is some negative developments, etc. we can get out of. More importantly, जैसे कि मैंने कहा कि हम last 1 month का सिग्नल नहीं देखते हैं. Okay, now this is very important because typically passive में क्या होता है कि हर कोई जून 30th को रीबैलेंस करेगा या दिसंबर 31st को रीबैलेंस करेगा. Because we don't look at the last 1 month data, actually I will know what the portfolio will be looking like 1 month in advance. So therefore, I have got 1 month to get out of some positions and 1 month to build into new positions. So therefore, it improves my ability to both buy and sell without any impact cost compared to many other quant systems which tend to do it on one given day, right? So it brings in more flexibility for me to actually execute it rather than wanting to entirely rely on that last day, the last half an hour or the last 1 hour to kind of do all of these changes. So this is broadly our Aditya Birla Sun Life Quant Fund. Now, any such process typically आपको एक बैक टेस्ट रहेगा. This is the back test, the theoretical test. ये है 2012 से दिसंबर 31st 2012 से अप्रैल 30th 2024 का बेस रिटर्न्स. इसमें हमने ऑलरेडी कॉस्ट इंक्लूड किया है 2.5% का कॉस्ट. Well, these are the returns. I think what is more important is this thing, which is the median 60-day return. 60 days, typical quant language में quarterly नहीं बोलते हैं, हम 60 trading days बोलते हैं. 60 trading days is roughly equal to 1 quarter because Saturday, Sundays, थोड़े बहुत holidays, etc. निकल जाते हैं. Similarly, 250 trading days is roughly equal to 1 year return. Okay. So if you look at the rolling 60-day or rolling quarterly return from 2012 to 2024, बहुत सारे rolling quarterly data points मिलेंगे. Almost, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 data points you may get. If you look at the median return, it is almost 6.46 compared to NSE 200's total return of 4.26. Why are we stressing on this is because it is repeatable signal. ऐसा नहीं है कि एक अच्छा इन्वेस्टमेंट हुआ या कोविड के तरफ टाइम पे हमने कुछ अच्छा सिग्नल पकड़ा, उसके कारण हमारा ओवरऑल रिटर्न्स इंप्रूव हो रहा है. दिस इज समथिंग वेयर वी हैव सीन अक्रॉस टाइम पीरियड. ऑफ कोर्स इट डजंट मीन कि हर 60 डेज में वील गेट दिस अल्फा. देयर विल ऑलवेज बी पीरियड्स वेयर अल्फा नेगेटिव भी हो सकता है, पॉजिटिव भी हो सकता है, बट ऑन एन एवरेज this is the returns that we get on a rolling 60-day basis compared to NSE 200. More important thing is, despite this higher return, आपका volatility, because it is coming from a good set of quality companies which is weighed on the basis of low volatility, आपका volatility actually similar to lower है compared to NSE 200. So not only are we getting or are we showing the evidence of a theoretical backtest model जहां पे returns मिला है, आपका volatility is also, तो आपका BP भी कम है in terms of experiencing such a strategy. More importantly, if you give time on a 3-year or a 5-year basis, there is almost a 94% evidence कि अल्फा मिला है कंपेयर टू NSE 200. एवरेज अल्फा 5% के आसपास है. 5 साल में अगर आप देखोगे तो 99% ऑफ द टाइम एविडेंस है कि आपको अल्फा आया है. 4% का एवरेज अल्फा है. तो the longer time frame that you give, typically we do think that one should at least give 3 to 5 years for such a product. There is a reasonable evidence of how this has worked on the theoretical backtest. Now, if I look below the hood, there are some interesting things that come through. फर्स्ट है कि ये पोर्टफोलियो बहुत अलग दिखेगा. ओके, इसका अलग दिखने का एक मेजर है एक्टिव शेयर, विच इज बेसिकली बेंचमार्क, विच इज NSE 200 से कितना अलग है आपका पोर्टफोलियो. ओके, नाउ टिपिकल फंड्स होंगे 50-55% एक्टिव शेयर. यहाँ पे एक्टिव शेयर है करीबन 80%. समटाइम्स एज हाई एज 90% इज द डिविएशन फ्रॉम द रेस्ट ऑफ द बेंचमार्क. इसके दो कारण हैं. एक है, जब भी मैंने अपना प्रोसेस बताया उसमें एक बार भी जिक्र नहीं किया कि बेंचमार्क का वेट क्या है. तो इसमें वी डोंट लुक एट बेंचमार्क में बैंकिंग का कितना वेट है, आईटी का कितना वेट है, एक्सेट्रा. दिस कैन बी 0% बैंकिंग, दिस कैन बी 30% बैंकिंग, दिस कैन बी 0 PSU, 20 PSU, दिस कैन बी 0 IT, दिस कैन बी 25 IT सेक्टर, एक्सेट्रा. बिकॉज जैसे कि मैंने पहले बताया, we are trying to diversify across factors, not trying to diversify across sectors. Okay, दोनों अलग concept है, and by blending in each of these factors, we are in which case getting a diversified product wherein we are controlling for volatility any which case, right? The overall experience is a lower volatile product compared to the market. So this is one reason why there is a very high active share. दूसरा है कि because the weights are capped at 5% and 0.5%. The heavyweights, अगर आते भी है तो 3-4% weight पे आते हैं. It's not that they come with very high weights. So because of both of these reasons, you get a very different portfolio. The top 10 holdings, the top 15 holdings, even if they are coming from the same set of stocks that is there in every other mutual fund. ऐसा नहीं कि इसमें कुछ हम अननोन स्टॉक लेके आ रहे हैं या स्मॉल कैप लेके आ रहे हैं या कोई स्टॉक है जो बाकी कोई इंडस्ट्री के पास नहीं है वो लेके आ रहे हैं और वहां से हमें रिटर्न्स मिल रहे हैं. ये वही स्टॉक्स है जो पूरे इंडस्ट्री के पास है, लेकिन उसका जो हम प्रोसेस बता रहे हैं एंड बिकॉज इसमें कुछ हम बेंचमार्किंग नहीं कर रहे हैं, तो द पोर्टफोलियो टेंड्स टू लुक वेरी डिफरेंट कंपेयर टू अ नॉर्मल any other, let's say, large and mid cap kind of a fund. In terms of capital distribution, roughly 55% large cap है and 45% small cap है. 2020 से हमने देखा कि राइट हैंड साइड में मोमेंटम फैक्टर पोर्टफोलियोज बहुत चले हैं. These are the 10 most commonly found names in various portfolios over there. ये अपने पोर्टफोलियो का अगर आप देखोगे तो ये है मोस्ट कॉमनली फाउंड नेम्स. एज यू कैन सी ऑल ऑफ दीज नेम्स टिपिकली यू विल फाइंड इन एनी अदर वेल मैनेज्ड एक्टिवली मैनेज्ड फंड बिकॉज इट इज टेकन ओनली फ्रॉम देम. ओके, यहाँ पे बहुत सारे टर्न अराउंड, बहुत सारे केसेस ऑफ नेम्स है which maybe can give you returns, but it will always give you a higher BP because हमें पता नहीं है कि ये टर्न अराउंड सक्सेसफुल होगा कि नहीं. Okay. Let me now quickly move into what the fund will not do. ओके, तो ये एक ऐसा प्रोडक्ट है जहां पे जैसे कि हमने बताया कि इट इज टिपिकली बेस्ड ऑन फैक्टर इन्वेस्टिंग, आवर एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ हाउ इट कैन वर्क इन इंडिया. दिस इज अ ग्लोबल स्ट्रैटेजी. ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ इंडिया के लिए हमने किया है, ग्लोबली ऑल्सो देयर आर स्ट्रैटेजीज विच ब्लेंड मोमेंटम, क्वालिटी एंड लो वॉलेटिलिटी. हम भी यही 3 कर रहे हैं, लेकिन इंडियन मार्केट्स के लिए हम अडेप्ट किया है in terms of how we are constructing the portfolios, right? The second thing is we don't give any cash calls. ये fully invested होगा at all points of time. ओके, इसमें कुछ प्रेडिक्शन की कैपेबिलिटी नहीं है. बाय लुकिंग एट द पोर्टफोलियो, डोंट थिंक दैट वी आर प्रेडिक्टिंग कि मिड कैप चलेंगे, लार्ज कैप चलेंगे, ये सेक्टर चलेगा, वो सेक्टर चलेगा, एक्सेट्रा. देयर इज नो एबिलिटी. वी आर नॉट ट्राइंग टू प्रेडिक्ट द फ्यूचर. दिस इज बेसिस द फैक्टर्स दैट आई डिस्कस, द मोमेंटम फैक्टर, द विजडम ऑफ क्राउड, द क्वालिटी फैक्टर एंड द लो वॉलेटिलिटी फैक्टर थ्रू अ कंस्ट्रक्ट which is proven time and time over that over a period of cycle of 3-5 years it typically tends to provide you an evidence of alpha. इसमें हम कोई रिग्रेशन नहीं कर रहे हैं, कोई पोर्टफोलियो ऑप्टिमाइजेशन नहीं कर रहे हैं, कोई सेक्टर बायस नहीं है. बिटवीन 2 रीबैलेंस डेट कोई नया स्टॉक नहीं आएगा. सिर्फ स्टॉक निकल सकते हैं अगर कुछ नेगेटिव डेवलपमेंट हो, नया स्टॉक नहीं आएगा. तो इसमें कुछ आईपीओ नहीं आएगा. एटलीस्ट 1 साल का ड्यूरेशन होना चाहिए लिस्टिंग के बाद, उसके बाद ही आएगा. सो दिस फ्रेंड्स इज व्हाट आवर अटेम्प्ट इज थ्रू द आदित्य बिरला क्वांट फंड. द फोकस इज की लार्ज एंड मिड कैप स्पेस जहां पे ओवरऑल इंडस्ट्री भी है, वहां से वी आर ट्राइंग टू बिल्ड अ पोर्टफोलियो विच इज निश, which can try and give you the benefit of a very differentiated portfolio. ओके, जैसे कि मैंने बताया कि एक्टिव शेयर 80-90% है, बहुत डिफरेंट पोर्टफोलियो है. वी आर ट्राइंग टू ब्लेंड इन द मोमेंटम फैक्टर, लेकिन मोमेंटम फैक्टर में टिपिकली आपका वॉलेटिलिटी बहुत हाई होता है. इसमें वॉलेटिलिटी हमने रखा है in terms of weighing. Therefore, we blended momentum factor, the quality factor, and the low volatility factor to try and create a signal which is repeatable, which over 3-5 year periods typically tends to provide value to the investor. So I'll kind of stop here. Happy to take on any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Harish. We have some questions which have come into the question and answer box. I will try and give and discuss questions. I'll try and bunch them together so that we can answer these commonly. So we have a question here from Mr. Ajay Nagpal that since there is no specific sector allocation, can the fund go up to 70-80 investment in one sector only?
Sorry, I lost you. Could you repeat it? Sorry.
Since there is no specific sector allocation, can the fund go up to 70-80% investment in a single sector?
Okay. It's a good question. See, that is the beauty of Indian markets. Basically, for those of you who remember mathematics and statistics, इसका focus है NCR, which is basis n balls in a universe. हम r balls of a signal ढूंढ रहे हैं, right? Now, this works only when n, which is the universe from which we pick the signal, is itself reasonably diversified. Okay. आज के दिन में या हमारे बाजार में देखेंगे तो द 200 टॉप कंपनीज या दिस यूनिवर्स typically you will see 30-40 banking names, 25-30 IT names, 25-30 material names, 25-30 capital goods names, 25-30 cement metal names, etc. Right? So the universe itself is diversified. उसमें से we are trying to draw it. So when we look at the past, what were 12 years, actually no sector has been more than 30-35% because हर सेक्टर में कुछ ना कुछ आ ही जाता है. Okay, but yes, I mean there is no capping that we are doing of a particular sector. So theoretically, yes, possible that we can have 70-80% also from a sector, but given the constraint that our universe itself is reasonably well diversified, chances of that to happen are very very remote. So I would say 25-30% तक एक sector typically होता है.
Sarish, there is a request if you could explain the momentum factor once again.
ओके, टिपिकल मोमेंटम फैक्टर होता है कि 6 मंथ रिटर्न देखते हैं. ओके, विच इज बेसिकली एक यूनिवर्स है, मान लीजिए 200 स्टॉक है, आज से 6 महीने पहले का स्टार्टिंग डेट देखते हैं और एंडिंग डेट देखते हैं और फिर आपको सॉर्ट करते हैं. दैट्स अ टिपिकल मोमेंटम फैक्टर. इसमें हमने 2 नुआंस पकड़े हैं. एक है कि हम लास्ट 1 मंथ का डेटा नहीं देखते हैं. ओके, तो हमारा एंडिंग डेट एक्चुअली 1 महीने पीछे जाता है और वहां से हम 6 महीने देखते हैं. सो ये हो गया पहला डिफरेंस. दूसरा पॉइंट ऑफ डिफरेंस इज बेसिकली वी आर नॉट लुकिंग एट ओनली point to point returns. See, starting date or ending date price divided by starting date price nahi dekh rahe hai. I mean that is one parameter, but what we want is more importantly consistency in returns on a daily basis rather than looking at a point to point. So इसीलिए मैं एग्जांपल दिया था कि अगर मान लीजिए 3 स्टॉक है, फर्स्ट स्टॉक गोस अप 50% बाय, बट द फर्स्ट 5.5 months कहीं नहीं गया और लास्ट के 5-10 दिन में वो 50% चल गया. ये हो गया एक काइंड ऑफ स्टॉक. दूसरा स्टॉक है जहां पे बहुत वॉलेटाइल स्टॉक है कि 50% जाता है, फिर -30% जाता है, 50% जाता है, -30, और फिर फाइनली एट द एंड डेट इट इज एट +50%. और तीसरा है एक स्टॉक जो ओवर अ साइकिल धीरे धीरे ऊपर नीचे करके वो 50% जाता है. Our preference is for the third stock because it will have a far higher consistency of returns rather than just the point-to-point returns. Again, for those who are looking at it from mathematics or statistics point of view or engineering point of view, the momentum factor is the first derivative. Okay, what we are interested is in the second derivative. Okay, the slope of the path rather than just the path, just the end 2 points alone. So we are also interested in how it has gone rather than just the 2 points. So which is called the convexity of the path for those of you who want to understand this more. So this is broadly what we are looking at from a momentum factor.
And Sarish, there is another question which states technical analysis of stocks and high frequency trading based on signals has been there for many years. Then why funds based on fundamental analysis are turning to quants now?
Oh, it's a great question. See, I think कि मेरा ये विश्वास है कि all kinds of signals make money. Okay. Now the good thing about fundamental factors is they tend to be more longer term. Okay, which means that churn tends to be much lesser, and generally you tend to make money by time in the market rather than timing the market, right? So that is why we can put bigger money basis fundamental analysis. If you look at technical, of course it works. I mean, not that I follow technical, but I know many people who have made money in technical. But the ability to deploy large sums of money, to my mind, at a scale that we are talking about in thousands of crores, to my mind is limited. More importantly, the churn is very very high. Okay, so that limits it. Now what we have tried to do is we have tried to bring in the benefit of rule based, but with the benefit of the fundamental managers. So we are taking the insight from the active fund managers. Okay, we are then trying to blend in with these rule-based signals to try and come up with this kind of a product. Does it mean that fundamental investing that works? But fundamental analyst or fundamental analysis typically suffers from biases. So anything which takes the positive of fundamental analysis with lower churn, which wherein you can deploy greater sums of money, okay, and yet get repeatability that a rule base brings in, tends to get the benefit of both of that. And that is what our base attempt is when we are saying that we are using man and machine to get a product at.
Thanks, Harish. Another question. The selection of 75 stocks will come with a lag. In that case, do we miss opportunities? Also, does it make the fund more large cap inclined?
Great set of questions. देखिए, it's like say Ranji Trophy probables या okay, पूरे देश में 5,000 प्लेयर्स होंगे रणजी ट्रॉफी में खेल रहे होंगे, ओके, उनमें से अगर आपको इंडिया टीम लेना है तो यू विल टेक इट बेसिस से द टॉप 100 और टॉप 75 प्लेयर्स एक्सेट्रा, एंड दैट इज बेसिस देयर परफॉर्मेंस इन द पास्ट over multiple matches, right? The same construct is what we are talking about now. If I'm going to make a India team, do I take it from the entire list of, say, Ranji Trophy players, or am I taking from the list of the top 75 or top 100 probable players? Because these top 100 probable players have demonstrated something. It is not to say that the 5,000 players are bad. Obviously, the pool of these 100 players will come from the 5,000 players. As it comes in, we will start looking at them. But till it doesn't come through, we don't know whether we are going to get a better team just by looking at 5,000 players compared to these 7,500 players. So that is the long and short. Yes, it comes with a lag, but like we said, the beauty again of Indian mutual fund industry is it's got some of the sharpest minds. More importantly, they all have different styles. ऐसा नहीं है कि see, for a universe to work, it has to come from heterogeneity. There should be enough number of styles that should be there. So there are some players who are growth oriented, some who are quality oriented, some who are value oriented, some who are contrarian oriented, etc. This brings in the diversity of different fund houses which come through, and from there we are trying to draw a signal which is coming through. So I won't say that we are going to miss out anything, but yes, by removing small cap, yes, if I were to include small cap, will my returns be much higher? Absolutely yes. Okay, but the chances of volatility will also be much higher. More importantly, impact cost. पेपर में आपको मैं दिखा सकता हूँ रिटर्न क्या है, बट अगर मान लीजिए कि 200-300 करोड़ मुझे मूव करने हैं एक स्मॉल कैप में से, इट इज नॉट going to be without impact cost. So yes, at a particular scale, we can definitely look at it. But with this kind of a large and mid cap also, there is reasonable amount of scale, wherein our thinking is that, you can put a larger sum of money to allocate because the chances of it going terribly wrong are reduced.
Thanks, Harish. I'll just combine two questions for the next point. So this is largely related to the 6-month periods for the momentum factor. So why have we taken 6 months? And do you think if we look at take 6 months, we will miss a lot of rally and maybe enter at a picked out price?
Yeah, so see, the base signal of momentum can work with 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. सबका अलग अलग fade rate होता है. So the way quant practitioners typically say is 120 cross 60, skip 20. Trading days is roughly 6 months. That's a look back period. Okay. We hold the signal for 60 trading days, which is roughly 1 quarter, which means that the next rebalance typically happens after 60 trading days or after a quarter. And a skip means 20 trading days, which is that the last 1 month, we don't look at it, right? Now you can run it with 90 x 20, skip 10, etc. So we ran through all of these combinations. See, we are trying to optimize on 3 or 4 dimensions as a fiduciary mutual fund product. एक है returns, without a doubt, we are in this for returns, no doubt about it. Second is in terms of managing BP. okay, which is that ultimately you are outsourcing your clients hard-earned money and BP to us, and we need to do it in a way which also doesn't give us too much of BP. Okay, so therefore that is the second aspect in terms of volatility or the experience of this. We don't want too much choppiness, so that's the second dimension. The third dimension is, as a mutual fund, we are talking about scale in which we are trying. That means that we have to focus on churn, because very high churn at small scale can happen, but as we take bigger and bigger and bigger amounts, we don't want very, very high churn. So, which is why our churn is a key aspect, right? And fourth is the quality of portfolios, which is कि जो नाम आ रहा है, we should be fundamentally at peace with it. It is not that कि बस हमें लगता है कि बस हम कौन से स्टॉक में घुस रहे हैं, not from a valuation perspective, but from a pure discomfort point of view. Ki, is it really worth risking our clients' hard-earned money into this kind of a name, right? So these are the four objectives that we as fiduciary fund managers have, and that is how we try and optimize it. So one can optimize the signal only on one dimension, saying that मुझे BP चाहिए, कोई problem नहीं है, मैं वो सब देख लूंगा. Then of course we can get a very different signal. But if we are trying to optimize on each of these four dimensions, we will take trade-offs, and with all of those trade-offs is what we have come through with a proposal, which is trying to get you repeatable returns. Repeatable in the sense 3 or 5 year repeatability. We are trying to give you a portfolio where the quality of names is give you a portfolio where volatility is not as extreme as typical momentum factor, and we are trying to give you overall peace of mind कि हम कुछ गलत स्टॉक्स या गलत कंपनीज में नहीं इन्वेस्ट कर रहे जहां पे परमानेंट डैमेज हो सकता है, ओके, or a larger chance of permanent damage हो सकता है. So that is the reason why we have got this signal.
Thanks, Harish. Two questions combined again on hedging to avoid drawdowns. So how will you hedge to avoid drawdowns, or what will be the maximum drawdown, and how do you also have a stop loss strategy?
No. So we'll be fully invested. Like I said, we won't take cash calls. We won't be hedging. So this will be a fully invested product wherein we get whatever. If market goes down, we'll also go down. I mean, the idea is we are taking 20% signal. See, if we are going to be invested in the market, we get 100% signal, right? We are taking the top 20% signal from the momentum factor, from the quality, and in a particular fashion, right? Which is, but it is still exposed to the market. It's not that, we can avoid that. So we are not taking any hedging strategy, etc. For all practical purposes, we'll be fully invested at any point of time. Yeah. Coming to the stop loss, because this is a very interesting and important point, which I think needs certain amount of nuance and finesse to think about. I'm sure by now many of you may have looked at momentum portfolios. It has done very well over the course of the last 3-4 years, like we said. Now, typically momentum portfolios में अगर आप देखोगे तो मान लीजिए 30 स्टॉक है या whatever 30 स्टॉक है, let's say, okay. Now, if you look at between one rebalance to the next rebalance, maybe only about 44-45% of stocks actually outperform the NSE 200, okay. So मान लीजिए 30 में से 13-14 स्टॉक्स होंगे जो आउट परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं. Majority of them actually underperform, okay. But क्या होता है कि there will be say 3-4 names within those 13-14 names which actually outperform, which will hit it out of the park, which will go up significantly higher. There'll be maybe 1 or 2 names which will fall down significantly, okay, and the rest will be clustered around the market. Okay. Now, so it's basically the power law within that particular market, within that particular portfolio, that is actually giving you the returns. It is not about one particular stock which is giving you the returns. Okay. So that is the same principle. So therefore, we don't have any stop loss. Agar automatically next rebalance में वो Q4, Q5 में हो जाएगा, that is our stop loss. It will any which case get out of that portfolio, right? And so then we'll look at it when it comes back into Q1 at some subsequent point of time.
Great, Harish, thanks. I'll just take one last question before we close. So how will the fund manager generate alpha as the portfolio construct seems to be tilted to well-researched large caps as compared to any multi-factor 250 index fund?
Okay, I think again this was a question that you'd asked. So this is not tilted towards large cap at all. See, when we are taking about, say, 240 names from the mutual fund industry, right? It comprises of maybe 70, 80 large cap names. It will have about, say, 120, 130 mid cap names. And it'll have maybe 20, 30 small cap names, right? From there, we are eliminating small cap. So if you were to look at this signal, out of 70, 80, we are drawing certain set of names. Out of about 120, 130, we are drawing certain set of names. Of course, it is then going to be on consistency of price action, on volatility, etc. That is how we are getting maybe a 50, 55% tilt towards large cap and about 40, 45% tilt towards mid cap. So it isn't that, the top 75 is only comprising large caps. In fact, you might be surprised that when we look at the names, typically it is mid cap and small cap that dominate the top 75 positions compared to large cap. Because in large cap, yes, everybody will own a few nifty names, the heavyweights, etc. Those will be common across fund houses. But when it comes to the unique positions, they will be actually in the mid cap and the small cap names. So there is nothing at all that we are saying that, this is going to be large cap tilted. Yes, of course, it is going to be slightly tilted, which is what we have shown you, that a 55% tilt towards large cap, etc. But it isn't that, we are forcing it to look at only large cap names. So the top 75, and this is a constant thing that we are keeping on hearing, that top 75 matlab large cap hai. No, not at all. The top 75 typically, जैसे कि बिरला की अगर बात करूं, तो करीबन I would say about 40 names are large cap, and roughly about 30 odd names or 35 names are actually mid and small cap. Maybe lesser small cap in the case of Birla, but in some other fund houses, there will be more small caps out there.
And Harish, I'll just take one last question before I sign off. We sign off. Can we replicate the quant strategy across other schemes? Is the question. Because if this strategy is different from traditional ways of investing and is back tested well, then is it possible to do that?
See, every strategy has a particular capacity. उसके बाद जितना ज्यादा पैसा डालोगे, सिग्नल वीक होता जाएगा. You have to constantly keep evolving and adding more factors, right? So that is point number one. Secondly, it is one thing to say that, 5,000, 10,000 crores we can churn at 100, 120% every year. But let's say that, at Birla we are managing 1.5 lakh crores. Can we keep turning over, say, at 100, 150% every year? Quite honestly, the answer is no. Okay. The third is that, there are definitely insights that come with active fund managers. Okay. Like I explained, and there is a beautiful research paper for those who are interested, definitely recommend you to read it, called Selling Fast and Buying Slow. Okay. And this is basis actual fund manager data. And where they have analyzed, I think, about 15 years of fund manager data in US, close to about $600 billion, 4 million buy transactions, 4 million sell transactions. What they have actually found is that the buy transactions on an average make alpha. The sell transactions that actually detract. Okay. So therefore, the benefit of this insight coming from Quant, coming from these papers, is what we use in our fundamental thing as to when should we sell, because that is where our traditional weakness are. So if you are able to identify that, now in a pure Quant, it is ruthless, it'll go off. But even in traditional fundamental portfolios, instead of blindly averaging कि भाव 600 से 400 हो गया तो मैं खरीदूंगा, if there is a process in which we question it, so that we don't have lot of dead capital in our portfolios, that itself can improve portfolio returns quite meaningfully. So just to kind of close this, there are a lot of parameters of quant that we at Aditya Birla Sun Life Quant mutual fund currently have started to look at through the lens of quant. Of course, it's not going to be a faster churn and all that, but a lot of these insights actually come both in terms of evaluation of portfolios, in terms of our ability of decision making, etc., so that we are able to get that improvement or that repeatability of performance. Right.
Thank you very much, Harish. Thank you for your precious time. Thanks a lot. And to the audience, thank you very much for joining. आपका कीमती समय हमें देने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. We are live with the NFO on the smart switch or the pre-booking as well. You can start your investments right away, and we officially launch on the 10th of June, which is Monday. Okay. Looking forward to all your participation in this NFO. Thank you very much and have a great evening. Thanks.